The ring of Kerr. He took a draught of beer from his tankard, and then he returned it on the table as sandglass long he was sitting near a wall of the Red Serpent Inn. He was looking at the entrance door. He was calm. He knew that the most important thing for a hunter was patience, and he was an expert. Silver Tim. The voice surprised him. It was behind him. But how could it be possible? He let himself fall on a knee, dropping the chair and getting the knife. Then he got up and the knife darted up. He saw the man standing beside him exactly where he had figured him to be. He was wrapped in a long traveling cloak, like their first meeting. He stopped the movement of the knife just a little before the blade hit in the throat of the man. He looked at the guy in front of him, who didn't move and was not afraid of him. Either the hunter could feel it. Although if he couldn't see his face for too much time, fear has been a loyal friend and he had learned to know it. Too many times in his life he had been surprised by an enemy, and each time it had been a question of survival. He stacks back the knife and he got up the chair. He looked over the room. It was an automatic gesture, and without realizing, he memorized the positions of all the other people. The cloaked figure sat down in front of him. "Art thou ready?" He asked with the unusual accent that Silver Tim wasn't able to identify. "I am, but where's my money?" The stranger put one hand in the cloak and took out a bag of leather and pushed it on the table. "One half of it now and the other half when the job is done, as we agreed." Silver Tim weighed the bag. He opened it and he took out a crown. He let it fall back into the bag and closed it. And then he put it in his knapsack, which was leaning down near the table. "I'm ready." "Okay, let's go." The stranger stood up and went out of the door. Silver Tim followed him, asking himself how this man had managed to get behind his back unnoticed. But there were no any other doors. They went out into the street. A boy had in hand the bridles of two horses, two beautiful animals. The man didn't care about money at all. But Silver Tim had already known this at their very first meeting. He didn't try to press the price, although his demand was high. But in his profession, Silver Tim knew that he always risked a lot. He wasn't a simple mercenary. People wanted him when the mission was especially dangerous, or when somebody was troublesome.
The killer took the bridles and jumped in the saddle. The stranger put down 5 shields for the boy, and he turned around the horse. They rode down the street that went out of the village, in the direction of the sea, to the cliff of the Elfiras. They trotted out of the little village, vanishing in the night. The 2 moons were high at the night sky, and the white Tewaki was at the high of its splendor. The scene was clearly visible, and they were not taking many risks. Silver Tim didn't understand why the stranger wanted his protection, but in his job he had learned not to ask too many questions, because it could be dangerous. They rode slowly side by side. The road followed the coastline to the north, and the shining of the moons reflected in 1,000 little lights on the waves. Silver Tim's eyes peeled all the shades. Under his cloak, his hand was clenching a little crossbow with 2 darts. After half a sandglass of trotting, they could see their aim: the cliff of Elfiras. The stony steep descent was illuminated by the 2 moons. The foaming sea hit the rocks which indented the water near the coast, creating a danger zone for those boats which incautiously approached it. As it happened one night 10 years ago, when a violent tempest threw an unusual boat on the rocks and wrecked it. The morning after, the fishermen of the village nearby found the remains of the vessel. On the beach and on the reefs there were found many corpses, bodies of elves. Only one half of the vessel was still in sight, struck in the rocks. On the stern there was the name of the ship written in silver letters. From this event, the rocks got their name, the Cliff of the Elphyros. Dost thou know the story of the Elphyros? The stranger asked Silver Tim. I only know that there was a shipwreck 10 cycles ago. The fishermen thought that there had been a treasure, but now they think it's guarded by the spirits of the elves who died that night. Keep thy weapons ready. They will be useful over there. That statement had the effect of making crawl the skin of the killer, that quickly repressed that sense of uneasiness, and his hand strongly clenched the little crossbow. The two horses started the descent to the little beach near the cliff. The animals were bounded to a tree. The stranger took 2 torches from his pack saddles. The killer tied a rope on his belt. Then they set going in the direction of the rocks made shining by the water. The shape of the ship was designed against the sky lighted by the moons, and its nude mast seemed to be the skeleton of a giant who had died a long time ago. Approaching the cliff, a soft wind blew on the sea, and they could hear a frightening howling. The killer raised for a moment his crossbow, listening to the lament. Then he relaxed. His companion didn't seem to be impressed. When they were near the cliff, they stopped. The stranger looked at the rocks. He seemed to look for something, but in spite of the light of the moons, they couldn't see anything at all. Follow me. The stranger jumped on a rock, and then jumping from one rock to another, he left the beach, directly moving to the wall of rocks. The killer followed him, and he was still surprised by the agility of his companion. A sudden frightening noise impressed Silver Tim. An enormous snake emerged out of the water in front of his protege. Quickly he raised the crossbow and fired up the 2 darts. Both hit their aim. The snake creaked in its pain, and its head, injured by the darts, waved up and down. The murderer had drawn his sword, but the snake had disappeared. Perplexed, Silver Tim looked around, doubting. There wasn't a trace of the beast. He approached his companion. What happened? The other replied after a moment of silence, I don't know. Then he moved forward, adding, tag along. The way on the rocks was less smooth now, and they had to grip also with their hands for not to fall into the water. In the end, they reached the foot of the cliff, where big rocks fell down from the high cliff. It formed a type of disconnected platform. They went on cautiously. It seemed that the stranger was searching for something. Then he moved straight to the stone wall. Only then Silver Tim saw a little crack that opened like a wound in the side of the hill. We have to go in. Be prepared. Without looking at the killer, the stranger took a tinder box from an inner pocket of the cloak, and he lit the torch. The light rebounded smoothly over the rocks. Nervous shades were dancing over the rocks while the 2 ones entered the cave. The killer went before of his protege. His right hand held closely the sword. With the left one clenched a knife. At first the cave seemed to be narrow. After they had made some steps inside, the cave grew wider as they could imagine. The water of the sea had formed an underground inlet, and a small narrow passage followed it. The murderer stopped and made sign to the stranger to stand silently. They looked around, frightened. Then the guys heard a rustling noise. The stranger raised the torch over his head, and they looked up. It seemed as if the ceiling of the cave was falling down. Dozens of giant bats had left the cave, disturbed by the light. The killer and the stranger tried to avoid the animal flying around madly. His sword stabbed, hitting those who came too near, and with the knife he did the same. After some moments, the animals left, flying in the night. Silver Tim cleaned the two blades at a strip of leather fixed at his leg. He looked around and stood surprised. It seemed that he had killed too many bats. He shook his head. In the fighting chaos, he must have killed more bats than he had thought. "It's all right?" his companion asked. "Yes. Let's go ahead."
They left behind the little subterranean lake, and they began to penetrate the cave, which was huge. It was softly ascent. The water of the sea didn't reach that inner part. Even the humidity was high and the rocks slippery. The stranger leant against the wall so he couldn't fall. A little azure cloud got up from the moss. With a rough movement, he left the wall. He rapidly reached the murderer and took his wrist before he could touch the rocks. "Thou shouldst not lean against the wall. The moss is poisonous. The spores can kill a man who respires them." Silver Tim looked at the wall covered with moss and nodded. They went on, and the killer asked himself again who was that man with a strange accent. A movement made him stiffen at something before them had shifted. Something large, a shadow, came nearer, and the light of the torch showed the muzzle of a reptile, not even encouraging. The beast hissed his challenge and came nearer. Silver Tim bent on his knees, ready to face his enemy. The tongue of the reptile whipped the air what just a moment before had been the killer. They stood in front, controlling each other, the beast and the man. The being moved rapidly, trying to bite his adversary. Silver Tim rolled aside to avoid it. But the rapidity of the beast was remarkable. It turned around, but its jaws bit again. The air. Silver Tim's sword hit the body of the monster that creaked. The killer moved away from the mouth, trying to escape the jaws of the being. But he didn't expect that the tail could be dangerous as well. The hit he got let him fly some steps away. The pain took him the breath. With half-opened eyes, he saw the beast fall upon him to finish him. He forced himself to ignore the pain. He rolled aside. And when the snout of the animal hit the rock, he sank the sword in the reptile's eye since the guard. The enormous body became utterly on the ground, lifeless. The killer breathed with difficulty. His flank ached. The being disappeared, and his sword fell on the ground. Incredulous, he looked around the cave. The monster had disappeared, but the pain remained. "Is all okay?" He had forgotten for a while his protected and the reason that led him there. "Yes, just a moment." Painfully, he stood up, leaning to the sword. He breathed slowly. He relaxed his muscles. Then he moved with secure steps. "Let's go." The stranger admired the determination of the killer, but he said nothing. He just followed him. They kept on penetrating in the cave. The air was cold now, and seemed that the cave passed under the whole region, or at worst under the whole kingdom. Silver Tim was torn between the rule that he had imposed in himself some years before to ask no question after having accepted a task, and the curiosity of those mysterious disappearances. But a new movement in front of him took him away from those thoughts. An enormous spider was looking at them. Two red eyes with no expression impended the monstrous mouth of the beast. The killer was ready to attack, but the torch flew over his head, hitting the monster that screeched for the contact with the fire.
Silver Tim hurled himself against the spider, hitting it with his sword. The blade deeply sank in the body of the monster. The blood flooded out plentifully from the wound on the hand of the killer, who cried in pain. The stranger quickly rushed and poured out some water on the hand of his protector. The pain slowly vanished, but the hand seemed burned. Silver Tim tore a piece of his cloak and wrapped up the wound. "We are almost arrived," the stranger assured. "When we are back at the horses, I will medicate thy wound better." "Let's do it fast, then." The killer sheathed the knife and grasped the sword that was lying on the floor. With the left hand, the body of the spider was no more. The stranger switched on the second torch with the flame of the dying one. They moved forward deeper in the cave. The walls were less wet and the air drier. The dampness of the sea didn't reach that cave, and breathing was easier. The two fellows stopped themselves, hearing a rhythmic noise that approached. It seemed to be steps. What other things were waiting for them? Bones without meat entered into the light of the torch. An evil light shone in those empty orbits. Swords worn out by the rust and the time shined menacing in the skeleton's hands, and rusted shields with unknown symbols were defending those bones. The killer sighed with a rush that made hurt his flank. He ran against the undeads that were facing them. The swords clashed with a shrill sound. The only other sound was the painful breath of Silver Tim, who avoided and fainted. With his sword, the killer hit continuously his challengers. At the end, a skeleton hit the flank of the murderer, who fell down. The undead raised victoriously the sword to end the life of the man. But the skeleton arm was hit by a sword that, darting in the dark, broke it. With his sight clouded by pain, Silver Tim looked at the stranger grasping a sword and beating the bones of the only two enemies left. He looked with curiosity at the shape of that sword that was unusual for him, and admired the agility of the stranger and the elegance of his movements. When the last skeleton was slashed, the stranger helped the killer to get up. "I think thee better leave me here alone. I can't help thee anymore," Silver Tim said. But it seemed that the other one didn't listen to him. "We are near to arrive, and thou hast gained the right to know. To know. But to know what?" The foggy mind of the killer was hardly able to keep hold to reality. They started again to walk, slowly after a few steps. Silver Tim accounted himself that the cave was larger.
The stranger watched around and sighed. Then he helped the murderer to sit down. "Wait here. Now we have to face the most difficult thing." Silver Tim saw the cape of his companion move, while the torch illuminated the wide cave. Then the hand hurled it ahead. The flame still burned when the torch touched the ground and illuminated one figure seated on the cliff.
He was richly dressed, but his flesh was withered. His eyes were fixed without expression. Beside him, on the cliff, a small light shone. But Silver Tim couldn't see what caused it. He saw, however, the figure of the undead master to get up. It was frightful. The teeth, by now uncovered, made that an evil smile was imprinted on that face that had defied death. A skeletal arm raised against the stranger. Unreal words were diffused through the cave. A strong wind like a hurricane raised up. For a long moment, the killer saw nothing, blinded from the dust raised from the fury of the wind. Then all was calm. Some plants raised from the ground to build up a wall to protect the stranger. But its cape had been moved from the wind, and Silver Tim could finally see his face. The hair fell back long onto the shoulders, 2 pointed ears were well in sight, and the eyes were surmounted from eyebrow arcs towards the high. That I may be burned by the fire of Lemenghan, whispered Silver Tim, one elf. The wall of plants vanished, and the elf it began to recite incomprehensible words. Plants raised from the ground tried to wrap the undead, but their coils seemed to tighten the air. The figure of the enemy disappeared, in order to reappear a little after new words, and the ice covered the floor of the cave. But the elf had disappeared. His adversary looked for him, his face lacking of expression. Without warning, the cliff behind of him moved, and the figure of the elf detached from the rock, attacking with the sword its adversary. But the undead monster succeeded to defend himself, parrying the thrusting of the elf. He managed to gain distance, and again the magical words filled up the air. The wind raised again, but the killer saw a new wall of plants arise. Under the scream of the wind, he heard one new invocation. Then plants raised up from the land and came down from the ceiling of the cave, smashing the undead. All it was silent in a moment. The plants were dissolved, and the elf collapsed, gasping to the ground. "Hey, all good?" asked the killer. The elf made a signal with the hand, then he got up. He approached the point where previously seated his adversary, and still lighted a dim light. With his hand he collected the object, and he observed it for a long time, like entranced. It seemed that he was watching the empty space. Then he roused himself, and he approached the killer, putting his hand out in order to help him to get up. When he stood up, he looked the elf in his eyes. They were green like a meadow in spring after a thunderstorm. "Who art thou?" he asked.
Albenta Usgstar of the Elves of Athalan. Thou art a wizard. It was not a question. The stranger nodded. Wherefore didst thee not help me earlier? He asked with curiosity. There was no anger in his voice. I have used all the energy in the battle against the wizard. I could not waste it before, or I would have lost. Silver Tim agreed. Why have we come here? For this one. The elf showed a ring at the assassin. Is it important? Yes, it's the ring of Kerr, a magic ring able to donate visions of the future. But now we must exit. Thou couldst returneth to findeth the treasures that the ship transported, without danger. Slowly, the two exited from the cave and returned to the beach. They were approaching at the horses, and Silver Tim panting asked, "What has shown thee the ring?" Remembering the moment in which the elf has remained still after having collected the ring, the face of Albenta became serious. Ominous events that I will try to prevent. The future can be changed? Asked curious the assassin. Each event changed the future. The ring showed me the most probable one. what it has in store for us. The elf kept silent, lost in his thoughts, then jolted ahead. Thou wilt be ready. A great evil will wake up from the past if we will fail in opposing it. The two spoke for a long time, and the elf bandaged the wounds of his companion, then knit the debit that he had with the man. From that day, they did not see each other again. The wizard returned to the islands of the elves with an heavy duty over his shoulders.